Fellas, what's going on? This announcement is for you. Listen, every single Tuesday night, 5101 Aberdeen at 7 p.m., we gather together so that we can have our guys group. We don't want you to miss out on it. Come see us. Be there with us. We've had some of the greatest groups we've had since we started this. We've been doing it faithfully every Tuesday for about 9 months now, giving men a place where they can come and just be around other guys who are trying to learn and grow and need support in community. Don't miss it. It's not your average Bible study. Say that all the time. We meet at 5101 Aberdeen. That's Josie's Restaurant. Get there at 7 o'clock so you can get yourself a plate. It's on us. And then at 7:30, we dive right into the topic at hand. Don't miss out on it. We'd love to see you there. Bring a friend with you so you can know someone, or we're pretty friendly. We'll get to know you really fast. We really want to see you there. That's 7 o'clock, 5101 Aberdeen on Tuesday. We'll see you there. I love you. Right Now Church, it is Sunday morning, and here we are for Right Now Church online. Thank you for joining us once again. We love to be here together with you. Here we are, barreling down, moving right into the holidays. You know, this is the last month of the year. Have you thought about that for a moment? This is the last first Sunday of the month in 2023. So my question to you is, are you ready to finish this thing and lean into your finish? It was a while back, I was talking to our team, and I believe I've even mentioned it on here. When you watch runners in a race, those who are running are not just racing to compete against each other, but they're also running to compete against time. And so what'll happen is, as you see these runners approaching the finish line, they're trained that when they get to the finish line, every single one of them, they'll lean forward whenever they cross the finish line. As soon as they're going to cross, they lean forward. And the reason is because they click their time from the moment the first part of their body crosses that finish line. So they're always lean their head forward. And what it does is it shows a commitment to finish. You don't back off and take wide strides and finish the race before you're actually done. You lean in to complete the race. That's why sometimes you'll see runners at the very end actually fall forward. They'll literally fall down as they're crossing the finish line. And it's because they're committed to finish. So my question to you today is, are you committed to finish? It's kind of where we're going to be going today, because commitment to finish takes a certain type of understanding in us if that's going to be our determination. I was thinking about you guys this week, and I've been praying for you and just loving you and believing God for great things for you. And as we finish 2023 and we're heading into 2024, isn't that insane? When you think about 2024, think about whenever you were kids, those of you who are not kids, because if you had to think about when you were a kid, you'd be thinking about right now. But for the adults, think about when you were a kid. You know, when I was 10 years old back in 1989, I legitimately thought that by now we'd be flying around in cars. But then I see the way people drive, and I'm glad we don't fly, because that would be worse. And then I got to think about even more, like, would we have to let them know that we were going to be flying that day? Could you think about that for a second? No, don't do that. That's not even the direction we're headed in. But we're in 2024, we're coming up on that. That's insane to me. But sometimes when we think about the future and we imagine where we're going to be, and then we get there, we look around, and maybe it doesn't look like you thought it was going to look. Maybe it looks better. Perhaps it looks worse. I don't know. But I wonder for a moment that, are you willing to stop and work for a moment on where you want to be? We base so much of our success on our external circumstances that we don't realize it's not based on that. It's why we started talking about the spiritual warfare that we were talking about last month. And I'm going to talk about it again tonight, because I made that commitment to those who were here. You're not going to want to miss that. You really want to be a part of that this evening. We get to kind of wrap that, lay it down, and then we move in towards our December messages. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm excited to let you know we got a treat for you coming up next week. I'm not going to blow the surprise, but we have a wonderful speaker that's going to come to you next week. And man, I'm excited about that. So don't you dare allow yourself to not be present. Bring someone with you. So I'm thinking about today, and I'm thinking about where we are. And I just want to say this to you real quick before we continue. Take time to go ahead and share this message. Invite someone in. We're ready to welcome you. We love you guys, and we want for everybody to be able to receive and everybody to be able to hear and know that God is doing a work. So take time right now. Go ahead and share. Go ahead and be active with your comments. Like, we love to hear from you guys, and there'll be somebody there that responds to you. Just forming community here online. So share it by all means right now. Go ahead and share this with your friends. Be specific. Share it by name. Don't just share it to your page, but share it with someone specifically. Let the Lord speak to them today, and they'll be able to join in with us or go back and watch it, because that's what we do. We want to create a culture of invitation. We want you actively inviting people in to hear the gospel and to receive what God has for them. You know, a lot of times in this life we live as believers, the thing that troubles us the most is that I hear it all the time. People say, well, if God is really there and God really loves us so much, then why do we go through hard things? Why do so many what we call bad things happen? And I think about that quite a bit, because I know that the struggles of life are real, right? It's hard out here in these streets. We go through this, we deal with different people, we have to interact with different things and people as well. And we go through pain and we go through disappointment. And we wonder at times, why? Like, if God's really here, then why am I going through this? Well, I want to take you to a portion of scripture. I'm reading out of the New Living Translation, and it's in Romans chapter 8. And I want to start at verse 16. I came to you out of Romans chapter 8 last week, but something jumped out at me that I really wanted to bring to your attention again. Romans chapter 8, we're starting at verse 16 and verse 17. And here's what is written. For his spirit joins with our spirit to affirm that we are God's children. And since we are his children, we are his heirs. What is that talking about? I want you to think about that word heir, H-I-E-R. If we're his heir, that means we receive an inheritance, right? Whenever somebody passes away and they've left a last will and testament to those who they've left behind, to their loved ones, they leave an inheritance. That means whatever they've accumulated, they divide it and give it to their posterity. They give it to their loved ones, those who are left behind. So this says that if we're God's children, then we're his heirs. We have an inheritance. I want you to say that with me real quick, because that has to get ingrained in us. Like, we really, really have to put that deep inside of us, and it'll cause us to live differently. Say this with me, I have an inheritance. It's automatic. I have an inheritance. You have received something that someone else has worked for. Now, who did the work? Well, Jesus on the cross says it is finished. He did the work. He did the work on our behalf, and we receive the benefits of that labor. We receive that inheritance. And what is that inheritance? Well, he gave us righteousness with God. He put us in right standing. He gave us peace with God. That's a big deal, because when there's peace, you move different. You think about that for a moment. Have you ever just had that anxiety? I deal with a few people that I get to the privilege of being in relationship with, that at times they struggle with anxiety. They become anxious and it comes out of nowhere. They have no control over it. You get that empty feeling in your stomach. Your heart starts to race. Your mind starts to go all over the place, and it just starts to feel so helpless and hopeless. But Christ gave us peace with God as an inheritance. So I want you to say this with me. I have peace with God as an inheritance. We have been given that peace. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to look for it. You don't have to strive. You don't have to strain. You have an inheritance of peace. It belongs to you. So we are heirs. And when you're an heir, you move different. When you know you have an inheritance, you move different. Then he goes on to say, in fact, together with Christ, check it out, just to go back and prove what we were just saying, we are heirs of God's glory. Say this with me again. I have an inheritance of glory. Now, when you think about that word glory doesn't just mean victory. That word for glory actually means the manifestation of God's presence. God, you have an inheritance for God to demonstrate his presence in your life. That's huge. But I want you to think about what that invites. And that's what this passage is going to take us into. It says, but if we are to share his glory, we must also share his suffering. That's the part where we trip, right? Isn't that the part where we get caught up? Why can't you just give me the glory so that I don't have to deal with the suffering? But the reality is the glory is for the suffering. Stay with me. The glory isn't to remove us from suffering. The glory's for the suffering. I want you to think about your life. Stop for a second. Just mull over the details of your life right now. Think about your family. Think about whether it be your marriage, your finances, your job, whether it be where you live and where you are in your life or in your ministry right now. Think about that. Just stop for a moment and evaluate it. Evaluate where you are in life. And I want you to just stop and wonder for a moment. Have I been looking at my current situation as punishment? Because a lot of us, I hear it all the time. Well, I know I'm going through this because I was a bad kid, or I know I'm going through this because I did this in a previous marriage. I know that this is happening because I behaved the way I did in this marriage, or I know that I'm passing through these moments because of horrible decisions that I've made. I'm not saying that our decisions don't have consequence, but what I'm saying is that God is not punishing us in this season. That's not where he's at. There's a day of judgment that still lies ahead. I need you to get that deep in your heart. The day of judgment lies ahead of us whenever we come face to face with God, and meeting God face to face, there's where judgment takes place. But here on earth, when suffering happens, it's not the judgment. Where suffering happens, it's because it's in those moments that we wait for the inheritance of glory. The glory is for the suffering. I want you to say that with me. The glory that I have inherited is for my suffering. So that means if suffering doesn't show up, then glory can't be revealed. And you might be thinking in this, I don't even know what you're thinking, but here's what that makes me think. Well, does that mean that I need to be looking for hard things to happen? Does that mean that I need to be, making hard things happen so that I can see more glory? No, we don't live that way. We live life in a different perspective. We live life according to the image and nature of God. This is why God has given us an entire manuscript. He's written this thing out through men and women, just like you and myself. He's written these things out so that we ourselves can have a demonstration of God's glory. That's huge. It's huge when we think about that because we get to see who he is. And in knowing who he is, we know what to expect. So what does that mean? I want you to go with me real quick to Matthew chapter 5. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount. And it says that there was crowds gathering. Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. It says, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him and he began to teach them. And this is what he says. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. Verse 10, God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. One more, come on. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. That's crazy. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. Jesus opens up this sermon, and in opening it, he begins to list hard things and difficult challenges in life that people undergo on a daily basis. People mourn all the time. People go through, there's people who are struggling in poverty everywhere. There's people who are being ostracized and rejected by people everywhere. All these things happen all the time. And he's telling them, I want you to realize that if you're going through these things, there's a promise that's connected to it. But here's my question to you. If Romans teaches us that in order for us to inherit this glory, we also have to be willing to take on the suffering. I want to pose this question then. Do you realize that without the suffering, you wouldn't need the glory? You wouldn't need to see God's faithfulness if you weren't going through moments that challenged his promise of faithfulness. Am I making sense to you today? If you had no bills, if you had no responsibilities, if you had zero desire or need to acquire any type of wealth, would you go to work? Would you still have a job? Would you still go somewhere and submit yourself to somebody who is an owner, or you yourself become an owner and accumulate wealth so that you can distribute it over your responsibilities to create a life of comfort in this world? Would you still do those things? The reason most of us go to work is not to just fulfill purpose. Most of us go to work to fulfill the purpose of take care of our families or take care of our responsibilities. We're faced with these things in front of us that we have to do, and that's what causes us to travail. It causes us to move into these different areas and challenges around new people and set these goals and have all these things we want to try to accomplish because we're trying to respond to the challenges that we have. If it weren't for the struggling, I wouldn't need the glory. I say this about Jesus all the time, and it's this, because I'm going to make this statement first. Say it with me. Suffering is part of God's faithfulness. Say it one more time. Suffering is part of God's faithfulness. We get so caught up in the promises of God, and what's happened is we've pigeonholed our God to he's only faithful when the prayer gets answered. He's only faithful when the challenge is overcome, when we're walking in this victory. Then he's faithful. But that's a lopsided view of God. He's not only faithful when the prayer gets answered. He's faithful because he made prayer available. Come on, don't miss that. He's faithful because he made prayer available. And do you know why he made prayer available? Because prayer is where we connect with God. Prayer is where we connect with God. He made connection available. Why would he do that? Because if his connection is available, it's so that his presence can be with us. So the promise of God's presence is so that we can go through the difficulties and even the successes of life, knowing that we're not alone. But the suffering is part of the promise. I need somebody to get that deep in your spirit today, because I really believe I'm talking to some people who think that God is blind to their situation, or maybe he's turned their back on them. Maybe you believe that today. He's turned his back on you, and that's why you're dealing with what you're dealing with. But I want to tell you today that this current suffering is part of the promise. Because he said, if you're joined together with me in suffering, it's because you've also joined together in glory. And what that means to me is that if God did not lie to me about the suffering of life, then he also hasn't lied to me about the glory that awaits me. But there's two things that we have to keep in focus. There's a glory that awaits me when I'm face to face with him after this life is over. And then there's the glory that is revealed in this lifetime as I pass through situations, hoping, depending, and walking in obedience. Suffering is part of that inheritance. Oh man, I know somebody didn't want to hear that today, but it's true. If he didn't lie to us about the suffering, then he's not lying to us about the glory. The suffering is here. The suffering is here. He's aware of it. He knows about it. And if he knows about it, it's because he's made prayer available so that he can walk through it with us. I want to put this in your spirit today. I don't know if you're shouting right now. I don't know if you're excited about this in this moment. But I think we need to make sure that we take this lopsided view of God that says he's only good when I'm feeling good, and understand that God is always good despite my feelings. He's always good. Pastor Erica and I, my wife and family, devoting ourselves to ministry doesn't cause us to be devoid of problems. As a matter of fact, it increases the number of problems and challenges that we face. But God didn't lie to me about those. And because he didn't lie to me about those, he's not lying to me about walking through them with me. And that means he's not lying about the inheritance that awaits me. There was a season in Right Now Church's existence where we had to travel from place to place. We had to move from place to place to share the message. There was extra work that was involved. But guess what? That didn't mean that God wasn't with us. And people would say, we'd get the buzz, the people were saying, well, if God was really with them, then wouldn't they have a building, or wouldn't he also provide a place for them to go? And we knew full well God was faithful because he gave us a message. God was faithful because he'd done this work in us before we started telling other people about it. Long before we ever existed, Christ had made a way for us to connect to God. We knew that made him faithful. But a year later, look where we are. I'm in a building right now that God provided, a building that I wasn't even looking for. Now, did this make God faithful? No. This was just part of his glory that I was able to witness because we were willing to walk through the moments when it looked like it wasn't faithful, when it looked like it wasn't good, when it looked like maybe he's not in this thing. But we knew he was with us. And if he was with us and didn't lie about the suffering, then he's not lying about the glory. I need to encourage someone today in that. He sees you in your suffering. He's right there with you in it. He didn't lie to you about it. It didn't catch him by surprise. So commit yourself to him in this moment and he'll walk you through it. I want to pray with you right now. Father, we thank you that we have an inheritance of glory and peace. But with that, we also know suffering is a part of the promise. Lord, I pray for every person watching right now. I thank you for the blessing that they are. And I declare that your faithfulness is being demonstrated even now in this season. Cover them, protect them, give them peace. In Jesus' name, amen. Listen, we'll be here tonight at 6 p.m. 311 Paris Avenue. We want for you to come join us, be a part of Collective together with us. If you can't be here in person, join us here online. And we want to celebrate God's goodness in this place. We've got a great evening planned for you. We want for you to come out. Tonight, we're going to culminate the message that we've been giving on spiritual warfare. We're going to lay down some strong anchors for you to tie down into so that you are able to stay established through every season of life, whether it be high or whether it be low. It's still a demonstration of his faithfulness. You are an heir of his glory and his peace. You've received it, not because of work that you've done, but because of his great love. I love you. I'll see you tonight. And remember, go be the church.